Sono confusa.
We ready? Mando in onda.
Allora, buonasera a tutti e ben ritrovati per questa edizione della 21ª settimana dedicata alla lingua italiana. Questa è solamente la prima dei tanti eventi che avremo durante questa settimana. Welcome everybody to our first event to celebrate the 21st week of the Italian language in the world. We're very happy to start this important recurrence with the evolution of the Romantic poem with our member friends and board member, Erika Caturegli. But before I let Erika start the week, I want to also remind everybody about other events that we are going to host. On Sunday, October 24th at 4 p.m., we'll have the journalist from Italy, Aldo Cazzullo, which will talk about his newest book, Il posto degli uomini, Dante in Purgatorio dove andremo tutti. Also, I wanted to special thank Silvia Giorgini Athoen for her incredible collaboration with the Wayne State. She's representing the Wayne State. And on October 20th at 3 p.m., we'll have Dante's Divine Comedy, A Metaphor of Universal Knowledge, a presentation by Raffaele De Benedictis, a professor at Wayne. Also, thanks to Michigan University, which will be presenting at that time, Playing with Dante, another program that is offered in Michigan, the Italian language. So I invite everybody to follow these great events, to follow us on the social media for all the update events, coming events, and classes, languages that we offer. Our website is www.dantemichigan.org. We are on Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook. You can find us anywhere. And I wanted to say thank you to Leah Adelphi, our president, for working so hard and be inspirational to all of us to keep having this event, even in times like the times we're living today. So with that said, thank you everybody to participate for your participation, and can't wait to hear from Erika and her beautiful presentation. Thank you.
Grazie Daniela. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to be sharing my screen and we'll be able to start. Could someone tell me if you can see the presentation?
It's perfect, yes.
Well, hello, everybody. As Daniela briefly said, today we're going to be talking about the evolution of the Romantic poem, and more specifically, Dante before the Divine Comedy, so what he wrote before the Divine Comedy. Here's is a brief outline for today's presentation because we're going to be covering a lot of different things. So we're going to be starting with an introduction about Dante's younger years. Then we're going to be talking about Il Dolce Stil Novo, which is a very important poetic movement to which Dante adhered and that is inspired him. And then we are going to be looking at some exponents of Lo Stil Novo, discuss some topics and themes that characterized it. And then we're going to move to Dante's La Vita Nuova, which is one of his, younger components. And he wrote this way before the Divine Comedy. And then we have selected 3 poems from La Vita Nuova as part of our project Beatrice Racconta Dante. And we've realized 3 videos for the celebrations of L'Anno Dantesco. So we will be showing the videos in which I will be reciting the poems selected, and then we're going to be analyzing the poems. And after that, we will talk about how Dante arrived to write the Divine Comedy. We will also briefly talk about Gemma Donati, who was Dante's wife. And then at the end of the presentation, we will take a look at the places that were selected to shoot our videos and why they were selected and why they are significant. So let's dive right in. So as a young man, Dante was educated in a very formal way for Florentine wealthy men of the time. So he had a good education and a good knowledge of Latin and philosophers and also of the Bible, clearly. And all of this knowledge helped him to shape his writing and also to shape a lot of the themes that he will continuously revisit throughout his life. And also inside this environment, he met people that he mentioned throughout the Divine Comedy, such as his master, Brunetto Latini, who was the one who truly inspired him and helped him discover the great writers from the Latin and Roman Empire era, and also Guinizelli and Cavalcanti. So it's in this environment that Dante started developing his writing themes and ideas. So let's talk about Il Dolce Stil Novo. Il Dolce Stil Novo, which can be translated as the sweet new style, was a new poetic movement that became popular thanks to Guido Guinizelli, who was born between the year 1230 and 1240 in Bologna. And he was actually a judge, but he delighted himself in writing poetry. And Guinizelli is particularly important because he continued and carried on the tradition that was started with the Sicilian school and the Provençal school, so the troubadours, by introducing new themes and new ways of writing lyrics. And also another great exponent of Il Dolce Stil Novo is Guido Cavalcanti. So Cavalcanti was actually one of Dante's best friends and early friends while he was living in Florence. And he is another character that really inspired Dante and Dante's writing. So Dante really admired Cavalcanti. He was about 10 years his senior, but they were friends, as I was saying. And from Cavalcanti's writing, Dante took a lot, and then the incredible writer that he was, he evolved Cavalcanti's themes and transformed them into something different. Dante actually mentioned Cavalcanti quite a bit in La Vita Nuova, and he always refers to him as primo dei miei amici. So he basically calls him his best friend. And Cavalcanti was also amongst the poets that responded to Dante's invitation to create this sort of discussion panel about love. Let's explore a little bit more Il Dolce Stil Novo. So Dante is the first one who calls lo stil novo in this way. And as I was saying, this means the sweet new style. And the first reference of this is in the Canto 24th of the Purgatory. And the language in which these poems are composed is the volgare italiano. So it's that hybrid form of language that derived from Latin, and specifically was the Florentine dialect spoken in Florence at the time, that Dante refers to as la lingua del sì, because Dante never calls the Italian language Italian, but he just calls them the language of the word sì, so the word yes in Italian. And so Guinizelli took his inspiration for this from the Provençal troubadours and the Sicilian school, as I was saying, by deciding not to write in Latin, but to write in Volgare. And there are several themes that are overarching amongst the poems that are exponents of the Dolce Stil Novo. And the first one is La Gentilezza. So La Gentilezza in English can be translated as kindness, but in this case, this word gentilezza does not mean kindness, but it means nobility. It means that value, that virtue that man should have. And Guinizelli talks about men being gentili in the terms of noble. And he says that nobility is not something that you're born with, but that is shown throughout your actions and your heart. So, and your mind too, because noble heart is accompanied by an agile and educated mind. Then one of the other themes that is recurring throughout the Stil Novo and in Dante's poetry is the idea of la donna. La donna meant as the woman, but in this case, the word donna has the Latin significance of domina, so mistress, superior. So the woman is seen as something that is supposed to elevate the poet's soul and the poet's spirit and help him reach a newer stage in life that is possibly devoid of sin. And then Guinizelli introduced this idea of a new form of love. So in the Provençal school and the Sicilian school of poetry, when they discuss love, they are talking about a more profane type of love, so the love for a woman. But Guinizelli takes that and tries to reconcile the profane love with something that is other, with something that is higher. And this leads him to discuss the figure of the women as angels. So as I was saying, women are women that possibly were part of the poets' lives, but they become these sort of intermediary and middle ground figures between earth and heaven that can help the poets and the noble, virtuous man to reach a new stage in life. So here I put a couple of examples from Guido Guinizelli's manifesto for the Stil Novo. This can be defined as his manifesto, which is Al cor gentil rimpaira sempre amore. Rimpaira is a word derived from the Provençal dialect, which actually means riparare, to repair to. So to go to a safe place. And the reason why I put it here, it's because in here, in this canzone, so this is a longer poem, it's not a brief sonnet, there are all of the themes that we just discussed are illustrated in this poem. So there's the idea of love as something that is other than the mundane type of love. There's the idea of il core gentile, so that virtuous heart that I was talking about. And then there's the idea that men are not born into nobility, or better, men can be born into nobility, but that's not what makes them noble. What makes them noble, it's the choices that they make, their intelligence, and the virtuosity of their heart. And here Guinizelli makes a metaphor related to the natural world, in which he says that if someone's heart and actions are mud, even if the sun shines on them all day long, they will never turn into something that's better than mud. So unless you have this status and you have this predisposition, you'll never be able to be a noble man, regardless of your social status. So there are several mentions of Guinizelli by Dante. And the first one, it's in the Canto 11th of the Purgatory, in which Dante encounters the great Italian artist Oderisi da Gubbio. And Oderisi is making, he's talking to Dante about the fleeting fame of men. So the fact that nothing is eternal. And he mentions the two Guido that are part of Dante's life. So Guinizelli and Cavalcanti, by saying that Cavalcanti with his poetry has already surpassed and replaced Guinizelli, and probably someone else will surpass both of them in terms of fame. And this is a clear referral to himself, because, with the Divine Comedy, he truly wrote something that is universally known. And then Dante meets Guinizelli in person in the Canto 26 of the Purgatory. And Dante talks directly with Guido after he introduces himself, and he refers to him as his and other fellow writers' poetic father. So he says, "Quando io odo nomar se stesso il padre mio e degli altri miei miglior che mai." So Dante truly recognizes Guinizelli's influence in his own writing and his own life. So without Guido Guinizelli's writing, Dante's writing probably would have not been shaped in the way that it was. And this leads us to the creation of La Vita Nuova. La Vita Nuova was written between the years 1293 and 1294, and it is referred by Dante as libello, so a little book, and it takes place chronologically after the death of Beatrice, but many of the storyline that it's contained in La Vita Nuova talks about facts that happened before Beatrice died. La Vita Nuova is also a prosimetrum, and this means that it's a component made of both prose and verses. There are 42 brief chapters with the comments on 25 sonnets. So what Dante does is that he writes the sonnets, and then he comments on them before and after, by giving a better context of these sonnets, because the sonnets themselves do not refer to particular moments in Dante's life, or specific moments, I guess you can say, but he provides the context of these sonnets with the prose that precedes them and goes after them. And let's talk about Beatrice. So Beatrice Portinari was a woman that actually existed. She was born in 1265, probably a year or a couple months after Dante, and died way before him in 1290 at the age of 25. She's the inspiration behind basically all of Dante's writing. This is a beautiful portrait. This is a beautiful painting by Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and it portrays Beatrice. So did Dante and Beatrice really know each other? Well, the answer is yes, but considering how much Dante talks about Beatrice and the role that she has in his life, you would think that they had this long relationship, and even though they were not husband and wife, they would at least been friends. Well, that's not the case. That's also because Florence, at the time in which Dante and Beatrice were alive, was a society in which men and women did not mingle, especially unmarried women with men. So Dante in real life saw Beatrice 3 times, and we know this because of what he tells us in La Vita Nuova. So the first time he sees her is when they're 9 years old. Dante is actually 9, Beatrice is 8, and before children in Florence reached puberty, they were allowed to go to social events with their parents. So that's why they meet in this context of a party. And Dante says that he sees her and she was dressed with a crimson dress appropriate for her age. He says this in the first chapter of La Vita Nuova, and this is how he describes her. Sì che quasi del principio del suo anno nono apparve a me, ed io la vidi quasi dalla fine del mio nono. Apparve vestita di nobilissimo colore, umile ed onesto, sanguigno, cinta e ornata alla guisa che alla sua giovanissima etade si conviene. And this is si convenia, sorry. And this is exactly what I was telling you. She was 8, he was 9, she has a red dress on. Then after that, he sees her once again 9 years later, and Beatrice at this point is a married woman, and she's out and about in Florence with her maids, and she ends up greeting Dante, just greeting him, nothing else. They never strike a conversation. And then Dante will see her one other time before her death, and that's it. So you might think, why was this man so obsessed with the figure of Beatrice then? Because it doesn't look like they had this strong relationship or this strong bond. Well, this is because what I was saying before about the figure of the angel woman, Beatrice in Dante's life, although he might have been infatuated with her at some point, serves more a purpose of elevating him and elevating his writing and furthering his writing. So she is his love interest, but this is almost a more platonic type of love. It's a philosophical type of love. And we're going to start now by looking at those 3 poems that I was telling you about. This is the first poem that appears in La Vita Nuova, and it's called A ciascun'alma presa e gentil core. This is a part of the first cycle of poems that are part of La Vita Nuova, of the first section of La Vita Nuova, in which Dante is still trying to figure out his writing and takes inspiration from Guido Cavalcanti. Let me pull up the video really quick.
A ciascun'alma presa e gentil core, nel cui cospetto venno dir presente, in ciò che mi rescrivan suo parvente, salute in lor Signor, cioè amore. Già eran quasi che atterzate l'ore del tempo che ogni stella nel lucente, quando m'apparve amor subitamente, cui essenza membrarmi da orrore. Allegro mi sembrava amor tenendo mio core in mano, e nelle braccia avea Madonna involta in un drappo dormendo. Poi la svegliava e d'esso core ardendo lei paventosa umilmente pascea, appresso gir lo ne vedea piangendo.
Okay. Oh, I made a mistake. I apologize about that. So we heard the poem A ciascun'alma presa e gentil core. Here in this presentation, if you want to go back, you can find the text. But this poem, it's so important because it touches upon a lot of those themes that I was telling you about that characterize this novel, but also it's heavily influenced by Cavalcanti's writing. So the first stanza, the first 4 verses of this poem are basically a call to action that Dante makes to his fellow writers to respond to him with their own poems about the topic of love, and specifically about the vision that Dante is about to describe in the other verses that make up the poem. And the main topic that is inspired and is part of this still novel movement is the image of the woman as Dante's mistress. So Dante talks about seeing a vision of his beloved, and notice how he never says Beatrice's name specifically. He just talks about his beloved woman being held by Eros, so being held by Cupid in a piece of cloth, and she's sleeping, and then Cupid wakes her up and makes her eat Dante's heart. So although this could seem like a pretty gruesome image, this was very recurring in the still novel style poetry, because it's this idea that by eating the lover's heart, that person becomes subjugated to the woman. This subjugation is not to be considered as something negative. It's actually something that, as I was saying, helps the poet commits to that woman and commits himself to elevate himself, to become someone better. And then in this first poem, there's already a foreshadowing of Beatrice's death, because Dante says that once the vision is about to end, Cupid turns and he's crying. And he's crying because Beatrice is dead. But we don't know this yet while reading the first part of La Vita Nuova. And then I forgot to say one thing. The other thing that I was saying is that this poem is still very reminiscent of Cavalcanti's poetry, because Cavalcanti talks about love as this sort of torment, this sort of battle that ends up physically hurting the poet. So the poet is in agony for his lover. And this first poem reflects that. It's this agony of Dante's having this vision in the middle of the night and seeing his beloved in this quite distressing way, because he says that Cupid is quite the terrifying vision. Now we're going to look at the second poem that we selected for this presentation. And we're going to be looking at first, and then we'll be explaining it.
Tanto gentile e tanto onesta pare la donna mia, quand'ella altrui saluta, ch'ogni lingua de ven tremando muta, e gli occhi non l'ardiscon di guardare. Ella si va, sentendosi laudare, benignamente d'umiltà vestuta, e par che sia una cosa venuta da cielo in terra a miracol mostrare. Mostrasi sì piacente a chi la mira, che dà per gli occhi una dolcezza al core, che intender non la può chi non la prova. E par che dalla sua labbia si muova uno spirito soave, pien d'amore, che va dicendo all'anima, sospira.
Okay. Okay, this is another extremely famous poet from Dante's La Vita Nuova. It's called Tanto gentile e tanto onesta pare. Now, from the first verse of this poem, we see that here Dante talks about that gentilezza, that idea of nobility, of virtue, by talking about his beloved one who's gentile, so who's this noble creature. However, this poem is the 26th poem inside La Vita Nuova. And starting from the 18th poem, there's a switch in La Vita Nuova. There's something that happens, there's an evolution within this composition of Dante's writing, because there is a very significant other poem, which is called Donne qu'avete intellato d'amore. And starting from that sonnet, Dante is not trying to find a response to his love interest anymore, but he's just content in praising his beloved. So he's just content in giving her praises, because this act of giving her praises and reflecting on her beauty, her kindness, her nobility is enough for him. He's content with that, and that action alone is satisfying, and it's helping him elevate himself and his writing. Also, we said that the first part is heavily inspired by Cavalcanti. The second portion of La Vita Nuova instead is heavily inspired by Guinizelli's themes, in which, as I was saying, he tries to find a conciliation, something that will make the mundane type of love that a man can have for a woman with the type of love that man should have towards God, so towards the divine. And this is what happens with this specific sonnet. If we analyze the text, we see that Dante talks about his beloved woman that is so virtuous, that is able to affect with her nobility the people who are standing around her by almost emanating light and these good strength from within herself towards the people who are around her. Because Dante talks about how he feels inspired when this woman greets someone else. And he's not just talking about himself. He says, La donna mia quando e l'altro saluta. So when she greets others. And there's also, at the end of this poem, already some ideas that Dante will revisit in the Divine Comedy of having love being a mean through which the poet can reflect on life and the divine. So it says, e par che dalle sue labbia si muova. And in this case, labbia is not lips, but more as her face, the word sospira, and the idea that he's supposed to pause and reflect and think about how his love is affecting his life. And now we'll look at the third sonnet that we selected from La Vita Nuova, and we're going to be showing you the video once again.
Oltre la sfera, che più larga gira, passa il sospiro che esce del mio cuore, intelligenza nova, che l'amore piangendo mette in lui, pur su lo tira. Quando egli è giunto laddove disira, vede una donna che riceve onore, e luce sì, che per lo suo splendore lo peregrino spirito la mira. Vedela tal, che quando il mi ridice, io non lo intendo, si parla sottile al cor dolente che lo fa parlare. So io che parla di quella gentile, però che spesso ricorda Beatrice, se ch'io lo intendo ben, donne mie care.
Okay. So this one is the last sonnet that appears in La Vita Nuova. La Vita Nuova is abruptly interrupted by the death of Beatrice. So at this point, Dante tells his readers as well that Beatrice is dead. And there's once again a shift in Dante's writing, because towards the end of La Vita Nuova, Dante's writing starts to have many of the characteristics that we will find again in the comedy. And this poem in particular is an anticipation of that. So in this poem, he has a vision of Beatrice already ascended to heaven. And this poem was, Dante says that it was requested to him by two noble women who wanted him to write for them some lyrics. And that's what he does. He says that he sends them a collection of poems that are contained inside La Vita Nuova, including this extra poem. And Beatrice, as I was saying, is seen as enthroned in heaven. So she's dead. And this whole sonnet distances itself immensely from the other themes and topics of the scene novel. And it foreshadows everything that Dante will be talking about in the Divine Comedy. What is very admirable is the fact that La Vita Nuova, although it's one of Dante's early poetic endeavors, has this also circular and comprised way of developing, because it opens up with a vision. So Dante has this vision, this dream of Beatrice being carried by Cupid, and it ends with a vision that it's totally different, because in the first vision we are seeing a very real Beatrice. So the way that Dante describes her is real. She's in front of him. She's a real woman. So at the beginning of La Vita Nuova, he's still referring to Cavalcanti's writing and this more mundane type of love. And then at the end of La Vita Nuova, which with this sonnet, Dante has yet another vision, but this is a vision of heaven. His spirit has been elevated. His mind has been elevated to talk about things that are not part of this world anymore, but that are part of something that is higher than us. And here, foreshadowing what he says in the Canto 33rd of the Paradiso, he ends this poem by saying that it's very hard to find the words to describe what he just saw, because he says, so io che parla di quella gentile, però che, vedela tal che quando il mi ridice io non lo intendo, si parla sottile. In this case, the adjective sottile doesn't mean subtle, but it actually means that it's complicated, it's heavy. It's subtle in the way that it's very hard to understand what he's seeing in this vision. And there's this last reference in which he basically told the two ladies for whom he wrote this poem that he's referring to Beatrice, and he also comments this sonnet in the prose after it by saying that he will revisit this idea once he'll be more capable. As a matter of fact, at the end of La Vita Nuova, he says that he will continue the praises of his beloved in a way that has never been accomplished before, and when he will be capable of doing so. And as a matter of fact, he ends up writing the Divine Comedy, in which Beatrice transcends her own earthly memory to fully become the angel woman that helps the poet reconcile profane and divine love in a way that will lead him to astray from sin. So Dante, with the conclusion of La Vita Nuova, and then with the writing of the Commedia, specifically the last portions of the Purgatory and the Paradise, is able to finally solve that problem that Guinizelli had been having of reconciling profane and divine love. by having the figure of the woman become devoid of her earthly features and become something that really enlightened the poet to reach new stages on his writing. So I added this slide here to talk about Gemma Donati because what I was saying before is that, in my opinion, Dante might have been truly infatuated with Beatrice, but Beatrice becomes something more, something else, something different. She is the mean that he uses to create something that has never been accomplished before. But Dante was married in real life to a woman who was called Gemma di Manetto Donati. So the Donati family and the Alighieri family were part of the same social group, and Dante and Gemma were probably wed around the year 1285 when they were around 20 years old, and they ended up even having 4 children together. So why is it that she never gets mentioned once by her husband? Well, despite some of the malicious recounts that we have from the time, including Boccaccio's one in which he calls her a shrew, it's more likely that Dante doesn't refer to Gemma because she doesn't represent that angelic woman, that idealized concept that would have helped him accomplish his poetic writing. So Gemma was his earth wife. She was someone that he might have been in love with. We don't know this. This was an arranged marriage as it was typical at the time. But we don't know if he had something against Gemma. It's more likely that she didn't represent what Dante needed to write his poetry, because she was part of his day-to-day life. Whether Beatrice is this memory, is this idea that he has, and it's not something real. As I was mentioning before, I wanted to briefly show you and talk to you about the places that you saw inside the videos. We selected 3 very important places for the Italian American community living in the Detroit metro area. These were selected by Leah Delphi and myself. The first one is the statue of Dante in Bellaio. The statue was put there by the Italian American community in the 1920s as a reminder of the beauty of the Italian language and culture, and it was actually put there in 1921, so for the 600th anniversary of Dante's death. And we wanted to pay homage with one of the sonnet to Dante in this way by remembering this beautiful statue. And then the second one, we shot it in front of the Guardian building, which is actually in downtown Detroit. And this building is relevant because this facade was created and was sculpted by Giuseppe Parducci, who was this Italian-American sculptor who was very active in Detroit and other parts of the United States in the early 19th century. Sorry, in the early 20th century. And then the last one was shot at the Transcending Monument in downtown Detroit. This was a monument that was commissioned to Sergio De Giusti, who was actually present at one of the Dante's recent events, and was commissioned to him by the Labor Association. And we just wanted to pay homage to him because of all his hard work and his incredible artistic contribution that he's been producing over the years. Sergio is still alive. You can still look his work up, and he did a lot of things for Michigan. And with that, this concludes our presentation today. I would love to take any type of questions you might have, but thank you so much for coming, and happy week of the Italian language in the world. I don't hear anybody. Yeah.
Which is strange. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Bravissima, Erika.
Bellissima.
È andata bene, dai, su. Poteva andare bene.
Bravissima. Yes, my name is Silvia Giorgini. I'm delighted to be here. I'm a proud member of the Dante Alighieri Society, and even more proud right now of, having heard this fantastic contribution by Erika. You were outstanding. I wish I had a professor in high school like you who made us love Dante instead of hating him. Unfortunately, that's what they did back in the days. They made you everything so boring. But Erika, you transcended our expectation. You were spectacular as always. And mostly you really so briefly were able to give us a great idea of the greatness of Dante, even before the Divine Comedy and the contributions of the others, important poets. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, this was definitely not an easy task, but it was truly important for me to talk about Dante's writing before the Divine Comedy, because the Divine Comedy is such a complicated, complex, incredible masterpiece that he did not just write that overnight. And, there was an evolution. There was so much that went into it. And I think it was very important to show that, exactly that, and also to pay homage to all of the figures that contributed to Dante's writing, right? Because he definitely took his inspiration from others and then definitely made it something different, maybe something better, even you could argue. But his upbringing, the people that he had around him, truly shaped him and shaped what he talked about in the Divine Comedy. So
fantastic job. Thank you so much. So I'm going to kind of ask around, are there any questions for Erika before I'm going to tell you all about the fantastic lineup of events that the Dante, with the help and assistance and cooperation of the Charitable Foundation of Livonia, and of course always with the collaboration of the Consulate of Italy. This year the Dante put together an incredible lineup of events, but most importantly put together all the four major state universities, and the students of these major universities. So I'm here just to be a little biased to invite all of you to register for Professor De Benedictis, who is actually a Dante scholar who teaches. We're so blessed and lucky to have him at Wayne State University. So I hope you can join us on Wednesday, the 20th at 3 p.m. I know it's a strange time, but with classes going on and midterms time, this is when we hope you can join us. And Raffaele will talk to us about the immense knowledge that Dante had. We already had a glimpse from what Erika just told us, but he will go into a little more into the Divine Comedy and how you can evince all his universal knowledge, and how the Divine Comedy is kind of a metaphor of this knowledge, medieval knowledge that Dante had. And our students, Wayne State Circolo Italiano, along with the Michigan State University students, just did a very fun vlog, which you'll be able to see on our social media. And Dante is actually, we are not gender biased. Dante is going to be a female coming in the 21st century, interviewing students. What will he find out? Thank goodness, though, Petrarca and Boccaccio will come to Dante's help to figure out what to do with this 21st century. And then again, you can continue join us on Playing with Dante. So the University of Michigan students will have dedicated an all night of games dedicated to our Sommo Poeta. And also the Grand Valley State students will have, you will see another video created by the students, and that also will be streamed on our social media. So please do not miss our students. You see, the new generation are coming up adoring Dante, put him in nowadays, and it's vital that we keep remembering the greatness of Dante. And last but not least, by all means, do not miss our major event on Sunday at 4 p.m. I adore Aldo Cazzullo. He already came here a few years back, and too bad that he cannot be here, but it's great that we can have him on Zoom. So please make sure you visit our website, www.dantemichigan.org. All these events are free, but you do need to register. So please join us, and thank you so much for coming tonight. And thank you, Erika, for an outstanding presentation. A più. 30 lode. Bye.
Silvia, can I just say something really quick, because I showed it. So I showed you guys the statue of Dante in Belial. I would like to remind anybody who might be listening to us that we currently are having a fundraiser to restore the statue. You can find all the information on our website, as we were saying, which is www.dantemichigan.org. And please help us out, help us restore the statue so it might see Dante's 800th anniversary, maybe the 900th too, who knows. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.